Welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I wanted to talk about the No Kings anti-Trump protests that quote unquote swept the nation, as the mainstream media would like you to believe. And I want to talk about how culturally, I just don't think they're as significant as the anti-Trump rallies were during the first term, and what that means and what the anti-Trump movement's future is going forward. So there were protests in in a lot of the major cities throughout the country. No doubt, I don't want to pretend like no one showed up. There, where I live in an undisclosed location, there were protests. There were protests on bridges, and you had some people even outside of the main city protesting, which was kind of interesting. There's this fat dude who's outside the place where I work he's outside with an unbuttoned shirt that doesn't fit him properly. His big old belly sticking out with like a sign that says something to the effect of Trump wants to be a king, but we won't let him, some gay shit like that. And I think that individual, the fat guy, belly sticking out with the gay sign, sort of is the sort of sort of is the antipathy, or sort of is like the prime example of what the anti-Trump movement has become. No one cares. Besides like the wine moms who watch MSNBC, did anyone really care about these anti-Trump protests? I mean, in 2016, like the Women's March and the big protests against Trump, like it was sort of a cultural phenomenon. Even us pro-Trump people had to admit that there was a real energy behind these anti-Trump protests and, during his first term. And frankly, it makes sense. Trump was less popular then than he was now. I mean, remember, he lost the popular vote in 2016. I mean, his win was a surprise to begin with, but then when he not only won, but lost the popular vote, I think it just blew a bunch of the libs' minds. They couldn't take it, and they let out all their anger by these massive protests. And also, the whole Women's March thing, this was in the midst of the Me Too era. And, let's be honest, I think a lot of the Me Too, the whole goal was ultimately to get Trump because of Trump, having a little bit of a sketchy past, having cheating on his wives, whatnot, whatever you think of that. He's admitted to it to some degree. And I do think ultimately the goal of the Me Too movement was to get Trump. And I think that helped fuel, these anti-Trump protests during 2016. Now it's just not the same. Trump won the popular vote this time. The Me Too movement is sort of dead, at least the extreme, unreasonable parts of it. There's a reason why Mark Halperin's come back to popularity. I mean, he was originally canceled by Me Too. Now he's back and arguably bigger than ever for not being on a mainstream media outlet. And the only reason he's been able to come back is because large sections of the Me Too movement has been discredited. So that's not a factor now. And the other thing, contrary to what, a lot of the protesters were saying this past weekend, people support Trump's immigration policies, at least what he ran on. He made some stupid statements about amnesty this past week that, I'm not going to get into too much, but he suggested that, illegal immigrants who work on farms and resorts don't need to be deported, some stupid shit like that. But what Trump ran on, deporting all the illegal immigrants, mass deportations, that's popular now. That's what people want to hear. That's what they want. So, yes, there is a sort of a minority group of people who don't want that, and that's what these ICE protests and these No King protests were about. But the energy is just not there because a majority of people actually agreed with what Trump said. I mean, there's been polling that says a majority of Americans approved Trump sending the National Guard to stop the riots in California. And that was the pretext for these protests, was Trump trying to deploy the National Guard and these libtards claiming he was trying to be a king. But the people support that. They support it. They didn't want a repeat of 2020 when Trump was much more cautious with trying to send in federal help when these riots were happening during the summer of love in 2020. So it just seems like the energy isn't there. And also, the base of the anti-Trump movement now is boomers. It's old people. In 2016, it was young people. Now it's old people. Okay. And, no disrespect to boomers and older people, but, just aesthetically, from an aesthetic point of view, it looks a little corny when you have, people coming out of their retirement homes to go into the street and they have to carry, a walker or a cane. And these are the people who are protesting against the president of the United States. People who can barely walk without assistance. I mean, these are the people that we're talking about. As opposed to 2016, you had these, young, full of energy young people protesting of who they thought was an illegitimate president. They were wrong, obviously, but that's what they thought and believed. And now you have, people who, try to make sure they get the early morning special at Denny's who are out protesting Trump. So the energy is just not the same. I'm not saying, numbers wise, the crowds, it does seem like some of the crowds were relatively big. And it was probably the biggest anti-Trump protest of this current administration, the second administration. The energy is just not there. Culturally, it's just not the same. It seems to me. Let me know in the comments if you think their energy is the same as it was the first time. I mean, to be fair, one of the reasons the energy probably doesn't feel the same is Trump is term limited. He wasn't in this first term, obviously. Now he is. So the stakes do seem a little bit lower. Maybe that's why the protests seem less important. I don't know. But that's just, honestly, as a Trump supporter, like the Women's March protests against Trump did kind of concern me during his first term. These protests just, at this past weekend, just did not concern me. I just don't see the anti-Trump fever. No matter what there's been some stupid polls that have come out from like Quinnipiac that have shown Trump's approval, way below water. Don't believe those polls. Quinnipiac is an awful pollster. They should not be taken seriously. I mean, the fact that they still even are taken seriously it's just ridiculous. So anyway, I was not impressed with the protest. I mean, I give credit to the fat guy whose belly hangs out of his shirt for being consistent. He's been out there since Trump was inaugurated, protesting Trump out. Even now it's summer, in the hot summer, he's all sweaty and fat and shit and putting up his gay sign. He is committed. But I do think that sort of epitomizes the whole anti-Trump movement now. Old, fat people who have nothing better to do with their time. And it's kind of sad. One last thing I briefly wanted to talk about. Last week was not a great week for the Trump administration. I will say that. In fact, it was so bad, part of me even thought about joining the protest. That's how bad it was. No, I'm just kidding. But as I said, Trump said something stupid about immigration, saying that, like I said, farm workers and resort workers maybe shouldn't be deported, which makes Trump look like a hypocrite because he owns several resorts. So whoever came up with that idea, you're not helping Trump politically. I mean, if you want to make him look like a hypocrite or a corrupt hypocrite, okay, but I don't think that's the goal of the administration. So just a weird comment. I guess it was Secretary Rollins who does agriculture. I believe that's her last name. Robert Barnes, who I'm a big fan of, has gone on the warpath against her, saying she needs to leave. Barnes is a great guy. He's really committed to America first. So if he thinks this Rollins character needs to go, we need her out. I mean, Secretary of Agriculture, I believe, is the position. And if she's the one who's giving Trump these retarded ideas to not deport and not, and to give amnesty, essentially, for farm workers and resort workers, then she needs to go. So I think that's noteworthy. And again, I've talked about this on Saturday and a little bit on Friday, but what Trump has been saying about the Israel-Iran war now, essentially, is very concerning. He's refused to rule out sending in American troops to help Israel. We cannot get into another Middle Eastern war. We just cannot. The whole point of Trump, this is the 10-year anniversary of when he went down the escalator. Trump's been the center of our politics for 10 years now. Amazing. And I want to celebrate the fact that it's a 10-year anniversary, but I can't when he's making comments that are really concerning me that he's thinking about sending in troops to help Israel. You can't do that. The whole point of electing Donald Trump is the fact that he's supposed to be able to resist the pressures to get us into war. That's the whole, sales pitch, is that he's such a motherfucker that he'll be able to go up against any special interests and do what's best for the American people. I mean, that's sort of implicitly and sort of explicitly the whole appeal to Trump and why we want him. And he ran on not getting us into any new wars during his first term, which was a major accomplishment. I don't want to undermine it. But that's why I had faith to vote for him again, because I thought, well, he's not going to get us into another foreign conflict because he didn't in the first term. But I'm really concerned about some of the rhetoric I'm hearing from him. So the anti-war voices in the administration and of influence, like J.D. Vance, like Donald Trump Jr., do your best you can to convince Trump not to send troops to help Israel, because if he does, he will ruin his legacy, ruin his second administration, and we'll definitely have a Democrat back in the White House by 2029 if that happens. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Please subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can get your podcast. I don't care. Just subscribe. Whether it's YouTube, I kind of prefer YouTube, but whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just subscribe. Thank you for listening, folks. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.